I'm here with David L. Shabazz, who is also the author of the Pro Wrestling's Black World Champions third edition. How are you doing today?
Doing great, sir. Glad to be on your show.
Man, I'm honored to have you here. You know, you have such a interesting background in journalism. You're also a professor. What inspired you to write Pro Wrestlers Black World Champions, and how did the idea originate?
Oh man, my brother Julian was basically the scholar of Black professional wrestlers. He wrote Black Stars of Professional Wrestling back in 1999, and that was really the start of everything. When he passed in 2020, I kind of picked up on his Pro Wrestling Black World Champions book. He had it was a smaller sort of an ebook version, and so I wanted to kind of pay little respects to him, and by doing that, I figured the best way to do that was to continue his legacy, and I picked up on a smaller work of his and just expanded it into what it is now.
That's amazing. I love that. Like, how do you think the representation of Black wrestlers in professional wrestling has evolved since you first started researching?
It's gotten better. There's still some, there's still some images that we still could use a little work. Now, understanding it's all entertainment, but the guys who really I think set the standard and held that standard in WCW, my boys Harlem Heat, Booker T, and Stevie Ray.
For sure.
They were strong Black men, and they presented that image, and that was the image that they wanted to project and to maintain. So they were never really out there shucking and jiving and doing
Yeah.
some of those things. They kept it real, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, most definitely. Those were definitely some of my favorite wrestlers growing up. Did you discover any surprising or little known stories about Black wrestling champions during your research for the book?
Well, yeah, one was actually Bobo Brazil. That Bobo had actually won the most prestigious title in wrestling at the time, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. He took it from Buddy Rogers, the original Nature Boy. So that was a huge deal.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't know that. How did you decide which wrestlers and moments to highlight, especially when updating to the third edition?
Well, it's all about the champions, and so that's what really made the difference, because this is just the world heavyweight champions. And of course, I start off with people I call the Trailblazers. Ethel Johnson, she did not win a singles, championship with one of the major promotions, but she was recognized as the colored women's champion or Negro women's champion. And she did have the tag team NWA Women's Tag Team World Championship with June Byers. So she was a respected, recognized world champion.
Wow. What was the most unexpected challenge you faced while researching the book?
Well, I didn't really have a lot of challenges. This was a labor of love, so it was great for me. It's a combination of secondary research, going through documents and books, old interviews, and a combination of some primary research. I actually interviewed Ron Simmons,
Okay.
Ric Flair, and Stevie Ray for this particular book.
Wow. That's sounds like this is like a well-researched book, and I know you have like an academic background. Can you share about a particularly memorable discovery or piece of history you unearthed?
I think looking at the history, Bearcat Wright, Bearcat doesn't really get the credit that he deserves. Bearcat won a version of the world title, and Bearcat was really the first African American to have some sort of a piece of the world title. And the things that he had to go through, the discrimination and everything that he had to go through to get the title. I didn't quite know at the time that he was a controversial figure, and by that he once he won the title, he didn't really want to give it up. And in wrestling, basically, when somebody does the job for you, you're supposed to do the job back for them or for somebody else. And Bearcat, man, once he got that title, he's like, I'm not letting this go. I'm the champion. He really enjoyed being the champion. But you know, the thing that he really should get the credit for, he's called the Jackie Robinson of pro wrestling. And
Oh,
that is because, he helped to really integrate the sport by refusing to wrestle and continue wrestle in segregated matches in Indiana.
wow, that's incredible. How long did it take you to research and write the latest edition, and how did it differ from previous editions?
Oh man, I've been, the research has been ongoing. It's been since I've been building up to this since 2020. I put out the second edition in 2022. And in hindsight, I guess it's not really fair. I kind of think that I rushed it a little bit because I was trying to get something out to my brother. But then again, you start thinking about certain things after the fact. But at the time, it really wasn't that many champions recognized. And I'll say that, there weren't really many of the females were not in the second edition, and that was because the promotion did not call them the world champion.
How has your personal connection to wrestling influenced how you approach this book?
That's what gives me the sensitivity, the understanding of it. I'm a huge wrestling fan. I'm in my 50s, and so I've been watching it since I was a child. So I've been watching since the territory days. I remember um, WWF as a northern regional territory, and watching Mid South and Georgia Championship Wrestling and Mid Atlantic Wrestling. So I remember it, back in those days up to now.
Wow.
So yeah.
What impact do you hope your book has on wrestling fans and the broader community?
I'm hoping that it's going to open everybody's eyes up to the little known facts about the Black world champions. I hope it sheds some light on some of the things that they had to go through to get to be a champion. Because when you talk about something like professional wrestling, that's not the same as Olympic wrestling or amateur wrestling, where you're really putting holes on the person, or even something like MMA, where you actually in legitimate competitions. And that's not to take anything away from them, because those guys are great competitors. It's just that when you're on a traveling show like that, you can't hurt your opponent. that's gonna hurt that's gonna hurt the ticket sales. So you try not to hurt the person so you can keep putting on the matches. um but yeah, so I'm hoping that it helps people understand that it goes back to the same old stuff that Black folks have heard all our lives. We got to be better than best, because it's not your in-ring skill that's winning the belt for you. It's your character, your persona, the way you handle yourself. All of those things go into the promotion deciding who they're going to put the belt on.
Most definitely. How important do you think it is to document the contributions of Black wrestlers in wrestling history?
It's very important. My brother, he was also a college professor, but he was a librarian at the time. So he was doing a lot of research, and he had archival materials and everything. And he first wrote the book after in 1998 was when he started on it, because that was the year that Bobo Brazil died early that year, I think like January, and then like the middle of the year, something like June or July, JYD uh, died in a car wreck. He was like, "Man, this is okay. We're losing all of these great people." And so him, being right there in the library, like, there's nothing. There's no literature about these people. All of these great people, wrestlers that we're watching, and nobody's capturing their history. There's nothing being said about them. So that's where he started writing. First started writing the book, and that's the importance of it. We want to document these things. We don't want it to be so scarce that you have to comb through old archives and run into historians. Like, I was fortunate to meet, several historians and talk to them and get some information. But it should be readily available to people, not so scarce.
Most definitely. And I think it's really important because it goes right along with the time of the civil rights movement. When Martin Luther King was active, and I think, like, that it would make a beautiful documentary. And if it was adapted into a film or documentary, who would you envision playing some of the key wrestlers you highlight, like Bobo Brazil or Bearcat Wright?
Oh, wow. Um, Well, you probably would have to look for some of the best black actors out there. So you got to go with Denzel. Um, you talk of wrestling, Terry Crews, because Terry Crews would have the body to play those roles.
Right.
Michael J. White could pull it off. Um, Ahmed Johnson.
Okay.
Ahmed has actually been in several, movies himself, and so he has the acting experience that he could play, Bobo or Bearcat. He could play either one of those guys himself.
Yeah, that sounds cool. I love to see it become a film or a documentary. Are there any wrestlers or stories you would like to explore more deeply in future projects?
Um, I was looking at something on the back in the territories and in the old days. If I do something else, it'll probably, right now I don't have any plans of doing a fourth edition of the champions, because while it is something that can continue and go on as we win more championships, but I wanted to kind of look into the territories, because I think there are a lot of great champions from those areas that could only win black titles, because they were only allowed to compete against other blacks, like Woody Strode, for example. Woody Strode is basically one of the blueprints, if you will, for professional wrestlers, period. And what I mean by that is he was, like a lot of them are, a former football player.
Okay.
Started off as a football player, and then, his career ended. He went into acting and went into professional wrestling, just like Lex Luger, Ron Simmons, Big Van Vader. So many of the guys came out of professional football.
Right.
Woody Strode was like a blueprint for that back in the early 1900s.
Yeah, most definitely. Like, that definitely has been the formula, and it's worked so well for Dwayne Johnson comes to mind. So, I hope that trend continues. And David El Shabazz, has been a pleasure speaking with you. I recommend everyone to check out your book, Black Pro Wrestling, Black World Champions, the third edition. Definitely check that out. And I thank you so much for taking the time.
Yes. Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Yeah, most definitely. You have a great day.
All right. You too.